Her eyes flicked to the small, earthen pot of water she kept by her side. She reached for it, then paused. Then, with shaking hands, she followed through with the ritual. By the time the sun peeked over the horizon, the scent of frying AKARA filled the air. Mama Titi wiped her brow and waited. And then, they came. First, a lone passerby, then a handful of people, and then more. Within an hour, a crowd had gathered, larger than any she had ever seen. People pushed and shoved, their eyes wide with hunger. "Mama Titi, give me 10 pieces, a woman shouted, holding out her money. "No, me first. I want 20, another man yelled. The frenzy grew. People who had once been content with 3 or 4 pieces now demanded double. They ate with a feverish desperation, their faces slack with an unexplainable need. Mama Titi watched, a mix of awe and horror settling in her chest. It was working. And as she counted her money at the end of the day, she realized she had made more in a single morning than she usually did in a whole week. Her hands clenched the thick wad of cash. She had done it. What would you trade for success? Would you risk your soul for wealth beyond imagination? In the heart of Umuola, where tradition and faith govern the people, one woman dared to seek fortune through forbidden means. Mama Titi, once a humble AKARA seller, found herself ensnared in a pact she could not escape, a deal that turned her simple bean cakes into an obsession, binding an entire village to an insatiable hunger. But when the truth surfaced, the very hands that once blessed her turned against her. Was it greed, desperation, or the whispers of an ancient curse? This is the chilling tale of how one woman's quest for riches unraveled into a nightmare that would haunt Umuola for generations. Now, let us go back to the very beginning, where it all started. The village of Umuola was a place of warmth and life, where tradition and community intertwined like the intricate patterns of a weaver's cloth. It was a land of storytellers, farmers, and traders, where the people rose with the sun and retired only when the moon had spread its silver glow upon the earth. In the heart of the village, near the busy marketplace, stood a small wooden stall, weathered by years of heat and rain. This was where Mama Titi reigned, the undisputed queen of AKARA. Mama Titi was a stout woman with a round face that was often glistening with sweat, either from the blazing sun or the heat from her frying pan. She wore a faded wrapper that hugged her wide hips, and her headscarf, always tied tightly, seemed to hold not just her hair but the weight of her worries. Every morning, before the first roosters crow, she was up, grinding her beans, soaking them overnight until they softened into a perfect paste. The rhythmic sound of her wooden mortar and pestle was as familiar to the village as the call to morning prayers. The aroma of her frying AKARA would soon fill the air, pulling people from their homes and shops, their stomachs growling in anticipation. "Mama Titi, give me 5 pieces. My wife has been craving your AKARA since yesterday," cried Okonko, the palm wine tapper, his broad smile revealing a missing tooth. "Oh, Okonko, your wife knows good food, I see." Mama Titi laughed heartily as she expertly flipped golden brown AKARA balls in the sizzling oil. "Take this one extra piece for her, and tell her Mama Titi sends her love. May the gods bless your hands, Mama Titi," Okonko said as he took the warm bean cakes, their crispy edges promising a delightful crunch. Mama Titi's AKARA was not just food, it was a piece of Umuola's soul. People swore by its taste, claiming no other AKARA seller could match her skill. Children saved their coins for it, elders blessed her business, and travelers took some with them, carrying the taste of Umuola beyond its borders. But for all her fame, Mama Titi was not a wealthy woman. She worked hard, yet her earnings barely covered her needs. Each evening, after the market closed, she would sit alone in her small hut, counting her coins, her fingers trembling with frustration. She would look at the clay jar where she saved her earnings, shake it, and sigh. It was never enough. "What more can I do?" she murmured to herself one night, staring at the flickering flame of her oil lamp. Is this all my life will ever be? Frying AKARA from sunrise to sunset, scraping for every coin while others build houses and buy lands. Her heart ached with longing. She wanted more. She needed more. The hunger for wealth gnawed at her, a deep, insatiable void. As she sat in silence, lost in her thoughts, a sudden gust of wind blew through her heart, making the flame of her oil lamp flicker violently. A strange chill settled in the air. Then, from the shadows, a voice whispered, low, husky, almost like the rustling of dry leaves. There are ways to make wealth beyond what you can imagine, but are you willing to do what it takes? Mama Titi's breath hitched. Her heart pounded against her chest. She turned sharply, her eyes darting around the dimly lit room. And then she saw her. Standing by the doorway was an old woman, her frame draped in a dark wrapper, her face hidden under a wide hood. Her presence was unnatural. There was something about her that made the air feel heavier, charged with an unseen force. The old woman's eyes, though barely visible beneath her hood, gleamed like burning embers. Who are you? Mama Titi managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. I am Ayabono, the woman said, stepping forward with slow, deliberate movements. I know your struggles, Mama Titi. I know the fire that burns in your heart. I have seen your hard work, your sleepless nights, your endless toiling. Mama Titi's hands clenched the fabric of her wrapper. How do you know all this? The old woman chuckled, the sound both eerie and unsettling. I know many things. And I know that you do not want to remain like this, struggling, watching others prosper while you labor like a slave. Mama Titi swallowed hard. The woman's words struck a deep chord within her. She had never spoken her desires aloud, yet here was a stranger who seemed to read her soul. What do you want from me? Mama Titi asked wearily. Ayabono stepped closer, lowering her voice. Meet me tomorrow night, near the ancient tree at the edge of the village. There, we shall talk. Mama Titi hesitated. That old tree was a place of mystery, its roots twisted like the fingers of an elder recounting tales of long ago. People avoided it at night, fearing the spirits that lurked in its shadows. I don't know, Mama Titi stammered. I need to think. Think all you want, Ayabono interrupted, her lips curling into a knowing smile. But when you are ready to change your fate, you will find me. And just like that, the old woman turned and walked away, disappearing into the night as suddenly as she had appeared. Mama Titi sat still, her body rigid, her mind racing. The room felt colder, as if the woman's presence had drained it of warmth. Outside, the wind howled, whispering through the trees, echoing the temptation now planted in Mama Titi's heart. She knew she was standing at a crossroads. One path led to the life she had always known, a life of hard work, struggle, and barely making ends meet. The other led into the unknown, a path shrouded in darkness but promising the wealth she had always craved. As she lay in bed that night, sleep eluded her. The old woman's words replayed in her mind, over and over, until the first light of dawn crept into the sky. By the time the rooster crowed, Mama Titi had made her decision. She would go to the ancient tree. Mama Titi's steps were hesitant as she made her way toward the edge of the village, where the towering tree loomed like a silent guardian. The night air was thick with tension, and the distant hoot of an owl sent a shiver down her spine. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, and the faint rustling of leaves whispered secrets only the spirits could understand. As she approached, a figure stepped forward from the darkness. Ayabono stood waiting, her frame barely visible in the dim moonlight. Her hands, thin and wrinkled, held a small calabash filled with a strange, murky liquid. You came, Ayabono said, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. Mama Titi nodded, her throat dry. What must I do? The old woman extended the calabash. Drink this, and the path to wealth will be open to you. Mama Titi hesitated. The air around them grew colder. She could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching her. The night air hung thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient secrets. Mama Titi's hands trembled as she reached for the calabash in Aya Bono's outstretched hand. The liquid inside was dark, viscous, and reeked of fermented herbs and something she couldn't quite place, a metallic, almost coppery scent that sent a ripple of unease through her. "Drink," Aya Bono commanded, her voice low and urgent. Mama Titi's throat constricted. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to run, to throw the calabash far into the darkness and flee back to the safety of her small hut. But then, the familiar weight of poverty and frustration pressed down on her shoulders. She had worked too hard for too little. She had watched others prosper while she remained shackled to the same wooden stall day after day. Slowly, she lifted the calabash to her lips. The first sip was bitter, thick like spoiled palm wine. She gagged, but Aya Bono's firm grip on her wrist held the calabash steady. "Finish it," the old woman urged. With a shudder, Mama Titi forced the rest of the potion down her throat. The moment it hit her stomach, a violent heat surged through her body, spreading like fire in her veins. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, clutching her stomach as a deep, guttural moan escaped her lips. The world around her spun in a dizzying haze. Aya Bono knelt beside her, whispering ancient words in a language lost to time. "It is done," she murmured. "From this moment forth, your AKARA will be irresistible. The people will crave it as they crave water in the desert. But you must follow my instructions exactly." Through the fog of pain and delirium, Mama Titi forced herself to listen. "Each night, before you prepare your beans, you must add a single drop of your urine to the mixture," Aya Bono instructed, her voice smooth as silk. "It will bind them to you. They will come, day after day, unable to resist." And this, she reached into the folds of her wrapper and produced a small, red cloth you must tie around your waist whenever you fry your AKARA. It will seal the charm. Mama Titi stared at the cloth, her breath shallow. The idea of tainting her food with something so vile made her stomach churn, but Aya Bono's words echoed in her mind, "They will come, day after day, unable to resist." She took the cloth and nodded. A slow smile stretched across Aya Bono's face. "Go now," she said. "Tomorrow, you will see." Morning came like any other, but Mama Titi moved with a strange new purpose. Her mind replayed Aya Bono's instructions over and over as she prepared her beans. Her hands trembled as she hesitated over the mixing bowl. Could she really do this? Her eyes flicked to the small, earthen pot of water she kept by her side. She reached for it, then paused. Then, with shaking hands, she followed through with the ritual. By the time the sun peeked over the horizon, the scent of frying AKARA filled the air. Mama Titi wiped her brow and waited. And then, they came. First, a lone passerby, then a handful of people, and then more. Within an hour, a crowd had gathered, larger than any she had ever seen. People pushed and shoved, their eyes wide with hunger. "Mama Titi, give me 10 pieces, a woman shouted, holding out her money. "No, me first. I want 20, another man yelled. The frenzy grew. People who had once been content with 3 or 4 pieces now demanded double, triple. They ate with a feverish desperation, their faces slack with an unexplainable need. Mama Titi watched, a mix of awe and horror settling in her chest. It was working. And as she counted her money at the end of the day, she realized she had made more in a single morning than she usually did in a whole week. Her hands clenched the thick wad of cash. She had done it. Days turned into weeks. Mama Titi's AKARA became the lifeblood of Umuola. People abandoned their morning routines, neglecting their chores, their duties, just to queue up before dawn. Even the village elders, men who had once dismissed her as nothing more than a common trader, now spoke her name with reverence. Mama Titi, your AKARA is unlike any other, they would say, smacking their lips. What is your secret? She would only smile, tucking the red cloth tighter around her waist. But power is a greedy beast. The more it feeds, the hungrier it becomes. And deep within her, Mama Titi felt something growing, a darkness she did not fully understand. And she did not know that soon, the price of her success would come knocking. Among those who noticed the strange happenings in Umuola was Pastor Isaac. A man of deep faith, he had watched with growing concern as his congregation dwindled every Sunday. They do not come to worship anymore, he murmured to his wife one evening. They go to Mama Titi's stall instead. His wife, a gentle woman with wise eyes, placed a hand on his shoulder. Something is not right, she agreed. It is not normal for people to behave this way. Pastor Isaac nodded, his jaw tightening. He did not believe in superstition, but he knew one thing for certain: when people turned away from God for something as simple as AKARA, there was a deeper force at play. I will pray, he declared. And I will fast. For 3 days, I will seek God's wisdom. If there is darkness in our midst, it must be revealed. And as the sun set over Umuola, Pastor Isaac fell to his knees, calling upon the heavens to uncover whatever evil had taken root in his village. Little did he know, the answer would come sooner than he expected. Pastor Isaac's fast began at dawn. For 3 days and 3 nights, he withdrew into his small, modest home, refusing food and water as he sought divine revelation. His prayers, fervent and unyielding, echoed through the quiet of his chambers. He pleaded with God to unveil whatever darkness had taken root in Umuola. By the 3rd day, a vision came to him. In his dream, he saw the villagers lined up before a large black cauldron, their hands outstretched, their faces gaunt and hungry. The thick aroma of frying AKARA hung in the air, intoxicating and inescapable. And at the center of it all stood Mama Titi, her red cloth glowing like embers around her waist, stirring the mixture with a smile both triumphant and sinister. But when Pastor Isaac looked closer, he saw the AKARA batter bubbling and shifting, morphing into writhing black serpents that slithered into the mouths of the villagers, binding them in invisible chains. He awoke with a start, his body drenched in sweat. "This is not ordinary," he whispered, clutching his Bible to his chest. "This is an enchantment." Without wasting time, he rushed to the village square. The sun had barely risen, but already, a long queue had formed outside Mama Titi's stall. Men, women, and children stood in anticipation, their eyes dull, their lips murmuring impatient prayers for their turn to buy the AKARA. Pastor Isaac's stomach churned at the sight. He pushed through the crowd, his voice ringing out like thunder. "People of Umuola, hear me." Some turned, startled by the urgency in his tone, but most remained unmoved, their gazes fixed on the frying pan as though spellbound. Pastor Isaac strode forward. "Have you not noticed? You have abandoned your farms, your trades, your homes. Even the house of God stands empty because of AKARA. Does this not trouble you?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. A few villagers exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. But before anyone could speak, Mama Titi stepped forward, her face calm but her eyes sharp as a blade. "Pastor," she said, her voice laced with an eerie sweetness, "I do not force anyone to come to me. They come because they love my AKARA." Pastor Isaac met her gaze. "They come because they are bound. Something unnatural is at work here." The crowd grew restless. Whispers filled the air. Mama Titi's grip tightened on the wooden spatula in her hand, but she kept her expression neutral. "Do you accuse me of witchcraft, Pastor?" she asked, feigning innocence. "I accuse no one," Pastor Isaac declared. "I only seek the truth." he turned to the people. If you believe in God, I ask you, fast with me. Just one day. Do not eat this AKARA. Let us see if your heart still yearns for it tomorrow. A wave of hesitation swept through the crowd. Some nodded, intrigued by the test. Others clutched their coins tighter, reluctant to give up the food they craved so deeply. Mama Titi forced a chuckle. You ask them to starve themselves, Pastor. She shook her head. They are free to choose. But deep inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks, fear. That night, the village was unsettled. Some villagers remained loyal to Mama Titi, but others, curious about Pastor Isaac's words, abstained from the AKARA. They spent the night tossing in their beds, their bodies trembling with an unexplainable hunger. Sweat drenched their sheets, and their throats felt parched. By morning, those who had fasted stumbled into the streets, weak and drained. Some collapsed by the wells, gulping down water as though it could quench something far greater than thirst. Others clawed at their stomachs, groaning in discomfort. And then, the worst of them began to scream. My stomach burns, a woman wailed, doubling over in pain. It's as if something is twisting inside me. A young boy clutched his throat, his voice hoarse. I feel as if I am being strangled. Panic surged through the village. Those who had continued eating the AKARA watched in terror as their neighbors writhed in agony. Pastor Isaac arrived at the square, his face grim but resolute. Do you see now? He asked. You were not craving food. You were under a spell. The villagers gasped, their fear morphing into rage. Who has done this to us? A man cried. And all eyes turned to Mama Titi. Mama Titi's breath caught in her throat. She felt their stares like daggers piercing her flesh. She opened her mouth to protest, but her voice wavered. You cannot believe this, she said, taking a step back. I have done nothing but sell AKARA. Then why do I feel like dying after one day without it? A woman snapped, pointing a trembling finger at her. What did you put in the food? Mama Titi shook her head frantically. Nothing. Just beans, water, pepper. And a drop of your urine, a voice whispered. A collective gasp tore through the crowd. Mama Titi turned sharply to the speaker. Nene, her young salesgirl, stood at the edge of the gathering, her face pale but resolute. I saw her, Nene continued, her voice stronger now. I left my key behind one night and came back to get it. I saw her doing something to the beans before she fried them. I didn't understand at first, but now I do. The village exploded into chaos. Shouts rang out, hands curled into fists. Mama Titi staggered backward. Lies. She lies. But the rage in the villagers' eyes told her the truth. Whether it was fully exposed or not, her time was up. Pastor Isaac raised a hand for silence. Search her home, he commanded. If there is nothing to be found, then we will know. Mama Titi's blood turned to ice. She knew what they would find. The villagers stormed into Mama Titi's hut. They overturned pots, tore through baskets, ripped open her wooden chest. And then, beneath a loose floorboard, they found them, bottles upon bottles of dark liquid, each carefully sealed. The silence that followed was thick with horror. Pastor Isaac bent down, lifting one of the bottles. He uncorked it, took a cautious sniff, and recoiled. Urine, he confirmed. A wail erupted from the crowd. She has bewitched us, an elder cried. Banish her, another shouted. Mama Titi fell to her knees, her heart pounding. Please. But mercy had long fled the hearts of the people. Take her to the elders, Pastor Isaac said solemnly. She must face judgment. And as the villagers seized her, Mama Titi let out a single, chilling scream. A scream that echoed through Umuola, signaling the end of her reign. The village square was more crowded than it had ever been. The entire community of Umuola had gathered, their eyes filled with anger, betrayal, and something else, fear. They had come to witness justice. Mama Titi, once the beloved AKARA seller, now stood at the center of a hastily constructed wooden platform, her hands tied in front of her. The elders of the village sat on stools before her, their faces grim and unreadable. A hush fell over the crowd as the oldest of the elders, Baba Obinna, stood up. His white beard swayed slightly in the morning breeze, and his eyes held the weight of decades of wisdom. He raised a hand, and the murmuring crowd fell silent. Mama Titi, he began, his voice deep and measured. You stand accused of practicing dark magic, of using unholy means to enslave the people of Umuola, and of poisoning the very food that brought you wealth. What do you have to say for yourself? Mama Titi's lips trembled. She searched the faces of the villagers, the very people who once praised her AKARA, who had once blessed her hands for the delicious meals she provided. Now, those same eyes held nothing but disgust and suspicion. I am innocent, she cried. I only made AKARA, nothing more. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Pastor Isaac stepped forward, holding up one of the small bottles retrieved from Mama Titi's hut. This, he declared, his voice carrying across the square, is filled with the very substance she used to bind us to her food. We all felt it, the unnatural hunger, the way our bodies reacted when we stopped eating it. This was no ordinary food, this was an enchantment. A woman in the crowd sobbed. I nearly lost my son because of this. He fell ill the moment he stopped eating her AKARA. Another man clenched his fist. My wife begged for her AKARA like a madwoman. How do you explain that, Mama Titi? Mama Titi shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her cheeks. I did not mean to harm anyone. I only wanted to sell my AKARA. I only wanted to succeed. Baba Obinna's voice was heavy with disappointment. And for success, you turned to the path of darkness. A silence fell over the village. The elders exchanged glances, nodding solemnly. Then, Baba Obinna turned back to the crowd. We shall decide her fate, he said. Mama Titi knelt on the wooden platform, her heart pounding against her ribcage like a wild drum. She had seen trials before, but never had she imagined she would be the one standing before the village, awaiting her fate. The elders whispered among themselves before Baba Obinna stepped forward once more. It is clear that the people of Umuola have suffered under the influence of your food, he said, his eyes piercing into her soul. We do not take such crimes lightly. Mama Titi's hands shook. Please. I beg for mercy. The villagers roared in disapproval. Mercy. For what she had done. Could she truly be forgiven? Pastor Isaac stepped forward again, his voice calm but resolute. We must remember that vengeance belongs to the Lord. But justice belongs to us. Baba Obinna nodded. Mama Titi, for your crimes, we declare that you are to be banished from Umuola. You shall never return, and your name shall never be spoken again. A collective gasp ran through the crowd. Exile. Worse than death for many. Mama Titi sobbed. Please, have mercy. Where will I go? Baba Obinna's face remained unreadable. That is no longer our concern. Two strong men from the village stepped forward, gripping her arms. The crowd parted as they led her toward the outskirts of the village, her cries fading into the wind. No one followed. No one stopped to look back. For days, the villagers struggled to shake off the effects of Mama Titi's dark magic. Some were still plagued by nightmares, others by an unnatural hunger that lingered in their bones. But Pastor Isaac led them in prayers, cleansing the village of its spiritual corruption. Slowly, the people of Umuola began to heal. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Baba Obinna stood before the gathered villagers. From this day forth, he declared, no one in Umuola shall sell AKARA again. Let this be a lesson that greed and dark practices have no place among us. And so, the people of Umuola never spoke of Mama Titi again. Her name faded like dust in the wind, her story becoming a cautionary tale told in hushed tones around evening fires. The stall where she once fried her golden AKARA remained abandoned, a silent reminder of the consequences of tampering with forces beyond one's understanding. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when the village was quiet and the wind howled through the trees, some swore they could still hear it, the sound of hot oil bubbling, the scent of AKARA drifting through the air. A whisper from the past. A curse that never truly faded. Mama Titi's story serves as a warning, one that reminds us that greed and desperation can lead even the most ordinary of people down dangerous paths. Her downfall was not just in seeking wealth, but in allowing herself to be blinded by it. Her fate was a consequence of the choices she made, choices that not only doomed her but affected an entire village. What do you think? Did Mama Titi deserve the punishment she received? Was it fair, or did she deserve more? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let us know. Remember, the moral of this story is clear: be patient, be honest, and never trade your soul for fleeting riches. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing folktales filled with lessons, wisdom, and thrilling stories that will keep you captivated. Until next time, be careful, watch and pray. Bye for now.